Hey there guys, this is Victor with VictorVectorJKU, and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys the recent wheel upgrade that I just purchased. Let's get into it. So you can see I have my 37 by 1250 Firestone Destination MT2s wrapped in my new wheels here. So what did I go with? I went with Dirty Life's 9303 DT-1 in matte black. I gotta say, I really like the appearance of these, but before we get into any details on these wheels, let's go ahead and do a little bit of recap of the last year with my steel wheels that I've been running. So I'm gonna have a link show up here in the top of the screen that's gonna direct you guys to the Firestone Destination MT2 video that I did about a year ago, where I was talking about the wheel and tire package that I originally went with, as well as putting a link in the video description below. So over the past year, these wheels have done a pretty good job for me, but I do have a few complaints in the way of performance that I saw out of them and issues that arose over time. So let's go ahead and talk about those a little bit. So there are two major downfalls that I found running a steel wheel. First one is it is very easy to bend the outer lip of the wheel when you're going through any rocky or heavily rooted terrain. And if you guys have been following me on Instagram or seen any of my off-roading videos, you know that I go through some pretty intense obstacles, and I definitely put these wheels through their paces. I've actually had to repair the bead on the wheel several times because they've gotten so badly bent. Most of the time it would still hold air, but it was just really aesthetically unpleasing, and also it's just something that could just continue to get bashed and beat up on. So I want to try to straighten it out and also to prevent any air leaks. And in the process of straightening the rim, there was sometimes that I actually gnarled up this lip on the edge where the lead weights are actually attached when you get your tires balanced, that they could no longer attach those weights to them. They wouldn't stick on appropriately. So I ran into a balancing issue with that, and that caused another bit of a headache for me. So I developed a bit of a shimmy when I would be driving down the road. It wasn't really typical of a tire out of balance necessarily. What I've actually come to realize, I think I actually fairly well bent my wheel. So one of the more recent times that I've actually repaired the bead on the wheel, I removed all the tires and I actually de-beaded the outer side so I could straighten it out and clean up the rough edge as well as touch up any paint. In that process, I actually threw in some balancing beads to see if I could get rid of that shimmy, and I couldn't get it to go away. So at first I thought, well, balancing beads don't really work, but I'm going to throw a caveat in here. That was with the case of these wheels, of which I've come to the realization must be pretty well bent, and we're not just talking just the edge, but literally the entire wheel is warped. So nothing to throw against balancing beads. They may work, they may not work. I'm not sure from my perspective. I'll get into a little bit more of that later when I jump over and start talking about my new wheels. The second issue that I ran into is a lot of times when I go off-roading with these guys, if I went into any rocky terrain or had a root or a large stick sticking out in the trail and it was to come inside my wheel, almost all the time I would bust off one of my valve stems. There's nothing here that protects it. It just sticks out so far and it's just a smooth edge. It's super easy for that just to get sheared right off in contact with something such as a root, a stick, or a rock. So those are kind of the main things that I found to be major issues with the steel wheels, and that heavily went into consideration with the next purchase of wheels that I went into. So why did I decide to go with a set of aluminum wheels this time over another set of steel wheels? So back in the previous video where I covered the initial upgrade of the Firestone Destination MT2s with my Pro Comp steel wheels, I initially was going with this because steel is more ductile, and it's more prone to bending, but you can bend it back and you don't have to worry about potentially actually breaking, cracking, or damaging to the point beyond repair of a steel wheel on the trail. And likewise, I've done that a lot where I've bent the wheel so badly that I had to break out a small sledge and had to actually pound the wheel back into shape, which worked out just fine, but honestly, it's a lot of work. I'm kind of sick of it. I don't really want to do that anymore. So aluminum is more of a more brittle material, and that is more prone to cracking and fracturing than a steel wheel. Steel wheel will be more ductile material. It'll actually deform, but it won't actually crack or break typically as quick as such would be the case with an aluminum wheel. Now, however, aluminum wheels do have a bit thicker of a profile. They're a little bit more heavy duty of a construction versus a steel wheel, where a steel wheel is just a certain gauge steel. The drum portion gets rolled into shape, gets welded down the seam, and then there's a center cap that gets brought in, and that gets welded in as well. So it's a very simple construction, whereas an aluminum wheel, typically you're going to have some sort of a casting or a forging that the material is going to be poured into, and it'll fill the voids. And being that it's more of a brittle material, that it needs to be a little bit thicker so that if you do have an impact, it's not going to just crack, fracture, and break and potentially lose a spoke and be no longer a functional wheel. So that's kind of the reason why they're going to be a little bit thicker in construction. Now, one other thing is aluminum is a little bit softer of a material than steel is. So there is a good chance that if I take this wheel up against a rock, it's going to easily scratch and score the material, whereas the steel, it's going to probably hold up a little bit better, but it also depends on the materials. I don't know off the top of my head what the material composition of this wheel is, but for the most part for me, I'm more about function than appearance. Now granted, I mean, I do like the look of these a lot, but wheel rash is kind of a badge of honor for a Jeep, you know. I'm not just a mall crawler. I go out on the trails and I beat up my wheels. I challenge myself and I put my rig through the test. So, you know, sometimes it's actually pretty cool to have your wheels all scratched up. Maybe not too much, at least not in the center portion, but at least the ring around it for sure, right? The other thing is typically with aluminum wheels, depending on what you get for a style, the valve stem is also a little bit more protected, or at least more likely to be protected than a steel wheel, because a steel wheel, they don't have the complex forms, cavities that the aluminum wheels will have. So it kind of limits you to being more of a surface mount like this versus being able to recess the valve stem into the wheel structure. So I'm kind of curious, what's your guys' preference for wheels? Would you be more of a steel wheel with the case of, you know, if you bend it on the trail, you can just bend it back, you just get out a hammer and straighten it up enough to get you off the trail or continue the day? Or are you more of an aluminum where you don't have to worry about bending it? The worst thing you'd have to worry about is if you had a hard enough impact that you could actually break the wheel. So go ahead and drop your guys' opinions in the comments down below. I'd love to hear them and know why you would go the path of aluminum or steel. So with that, guys, let's go ahead and jump over to the Dirty Life 9303 DT-1s that I picked up for Project Vector. They are wrapped in my 37 by 1250 R17 Firestone Destination MT2s. And what I went with is a 17-inch diameter wheel. It is 9 inches in width, and it has a 3.5-inch back spacing. So that is going to be measuring from the mounting face of the wheel to the back of the wheel. So currently I believe that I'm running either a 4.25 or a 4.5-inch backspace on my steel wheels. So being that I'm at 3.5 backspace now, that means I'm actually pushing my wheel out an additional inch. So the factory is 5.25 for the JK body style to 3.5. So all in all, I am nearly 2 inches further out than I was at factory. So this is going to have some pros and cons for me. So one, when I'm turning up in the front, I'm going to be less likely to hit the frame rail or control arms when I'm flexed and at full lock, right or left. Being a little bit wider is going to give me a little bit more stability off-road. But some of the setbacks being a little bit wider is that there's going to be some trails it's going to be a little bit tighter for me to get through. That, and also when you widen your track width, typically your turning radius is decreased. So there's going to be some setbacks there, but all in all, I think this is actually going to work out really well. I'm really happy with the stance of where Vector sits now, so I'm very excited about this. One thing that I thought was really cool, and what kind of helped push me in the direction of going with this version of the Dirty Life wheels, was that it has what Dirty Life calls dual tech technology. So what that means is that you can mount this as a traditional tire. It will hold the tire on just like it was on my steel wheels, where it mounts to the inside beads of the wheel. Or you can pick up their aluminum beadlock ring, replace the simulated beadlock ring, which is made out of ABS plastic, and you can actually mount it as a true beadlock. They also do provide spacers if your tire has a different thickness at the bead, so that way you do get the appropriate interaction with the beadlock ring to the tire. And so what I did was I decided just for now, I want to start off with just running these and see how they work out. They offer 3 different rings. So one is going to be what comes with the wheel typically, and that's going to be their simulated beadlock ring. and that is an ABS plastic. They also have a rock rash guard, which is also ABS plastic, but that guy actually comes over and he'll cover parts of these extended spokes just to give it a little bit more protection when you're off-road. And then you also have the aluminum beadlock ring, which is a functional beadlock ring. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be running this simulated beadlock ring and see how it holds up off-road. I'm not sure, being the ABS and the sort of the feel of it, I'm not sure if it's designed to or if it will hold up to the off-road driving that I do. As you can see what happens to these wheels, it may not last very long and I might be getting into that beadlock ring faster, but that's totally okay with me. I definitely want to switch up to a beadlock. I'm just at this point in time sticking with this just to give it a trial and see how things work out. Now the one thing that I do notice here on the simulated beadlock ring, the bolt heads do extend just a little bit beyond the face, so I could see over time that I might end up rubbing these bolt heads a little bit, and that could cause a little bit of issues. But honestly, I'm not really too worried about that. It shouldn't be a big deal. Then the next thing I want to cover is the valve stem. So on this wheel, the valve stem is actually very, very well protected. So first you have the simulated beadlock ring out here that's creating a bit of protection. If you upgrade to the beadlock ring, obviously it's going to be a lot more. But in addition, the way that this wheel is casted is that the valve stem shoulder that it mounts to is actually recessed deep down into the wheel. So it's going to be a lot less prone to actually causing that to get sheared off, such as I had issues with on my steel wheels. So I got my calipers here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull a measurement for you guys. So first I'm going to measure the outside, which we come up with right about 1.5 inches. And then on the inside, we're right about 3/4 of an inch. So what that basically means is where that valve stem is actually mounted to the surface is tucked in a minimum of 3/4 of an inch up to 1.5 inches. So no matter what happens, if a stick comes in here and hits this, it's going to be extremely unlikely to actually be able to shear off that valve stem. I think this is going to be great. I'm not going to have to worry about busting off valve stems and losing all my air pressure in my tires going forward. So I'm pretty excited about that. I think the design of this wheel is pretty cool. There are other manufacturers out there. I think Jeep has one, maybe AEV as well, and I'm sure there's others on top of that that have this dual wheel mounting style where you can mount it as a typical wheel and tire combo, or that you can actually mount it in a true beadlock fashion. So what do you guys think? Another thing I'm curious about what your guys' opinion is on this. Do you think that the dual tech is a cool design? And tell me why down in the comments below. So earlier I was mentioning how I thought that these wheels were bent and how I tried the balancing beads to try to repair the shimmy that I had. So once I had the new wheel mounted up to my tires and installed on the Jeep, I ended up on my very first drive, I got up to freeway speeds, and where I was noticing the shimmy before with my old wheels, now it wasn't much, it was just a little bit of a shimmy of the steering wheel, but I know from some other videos that I've seen that people having issues with balancing their wheel and tire, that they'll actually wear out ball joints in their knuckles, steering linkages, and it'll just cause more maintenance that you have to worry about over time. And I wanted to get away from that as quick as I could since I just recently swapped in my brand new axles, and I didn't want to start causing any premature wear on those components right off the bat. So I knew that I had to upgrade wheels and see what I could do to fix that. And once I did, that shimmy was gone. Didn't have it anymore, so that's what ultimately led me to believe that it was definitely my wheels that were causing the shimmy. And I don't think it would be a fair assessment to say balancing beads do or do not work, because in my scenario particularly, I think it truly comes down to the wheel being that damaged that prevented me from being able to use the balancing beads effectively. And I know there's plenty of other people out there that do use balancing beads, they swear by them, and they have no issues whatsoever. And I don't want to be giving you guys the wrong impression that balancing beads do or do not work. But yeah guys, so I think that's going to wrap up today's video. I am very excited about these wheels. I'm excited to get them out on the trails, see how they perform, see how this ABS ring holds up over time. and I'll definitely be reporting back to you guys. Hopefully at that point in time I'll be upgrading to the beadlock ring, and that'll be what we'll be covering in the next video down the road when I come around for a short-term or long-term review, depending on where timing wise that all lands for me. So hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, definitely hit the thumbs up button and give this video a like for me. If you aren't already, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends and other social media platforms that you may use. Otherwise, if you guys have any other feedback for me, definitely throw those in the comments down below. I very much enjoy hearing what you guys think, or if there's any other details that you want to know about these wheels or my build in general. Otherwise, we are VictorVectorJKU, and we are taking on this build and the trail in both direction and magnitude. Alright guys, have a good one. Catch you next time.